The gathering of elders had convened on the precipice of war. Ilara Quinn stood in the center of the obsidian chamber, her worn diplomatic satchel resting against her hip. Around her, the Council of the Vryn loomed 7-foot-tall feline beings, whose fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed emotion no matter how stoic their faces remained. Their homeworld of Keshraval hung in the viewport behind them, a world of violet jungles and crimson seas that humanity had only dreamed of visiting until first contact 3 years ago. Now, that contact teetered on the edge of collapse. "Ambassador Quinn," Elder Thessar rumbled, his silver mane catching the amber light. "Your species builds weapons in our sacred orbit. This is an act of aggression the Vryn cannot ignore." Ilara kept her voice measured. "Elder Thessar, the station is a research facility. We've transmitted all specifications." A soft thump interrupted her, then another. Ilara's diplomatic training kept her expression neutral, but she felt it, the telltale wiggling inside her satchel. The bag that supposedly contained only data tablets and treaty proposals now contained something decidedly warmer and infinitely more problematic. "Not now, Nimri." The cub had been following her since she'd arrived at the diplomatic compound 3 days ago. A small, spotted thing no larger than a house cat, with oversized ears and eyes like twin moons. The daughter of Elder Morveth, Nimri had taken an inexplicable fascination with the human ambassador, appearing in corridors, hiding behind furniture, and apparently sneaking into diplomatic luggage. Elder Morveth's bioluminescent markings flickered orange with barely contained fury. "You speak of peace while your battle station grows in our sky." "It's not a battle station," Ilara said firmly. But her words were undercut by a sound that made every Vryn in the chamber freeze. Purr. The vibration was unmistakable, resonating through the leather of her bag like a miniature earthquake. Ilara's heart sank. In Vryn culture, purring was involuntary, a sign of contentment that cubs couldn't control until adolescence. And right now, nestled in her bag among classified documents, Elder Morveth's daughter was purring loud enough to rattle the chamber's acoustics. The elder's luminescent patterns shifted. Thessar's went from angry crimson to a peculiar shade of amber. Morveth's markings stuttered between orange fury and something that looked almost like, was that purple? Embarrassment? None of them said a word about the purring. Ilara made a choice. She continued as if her diplomatic bag wasn't currently vibrating like a starship engine. "The research station is designed to study the Keshra system's unique radiation patterns that could revolutionize energy production for both our species." Purr Moreau. A tiny striped paw emerged from the partially unzipped top of the bag. Elder Thessar's whiskers twitched. His gaze remained locked on Ilara's face with the intensity of a predator, but she could have sworn she saw his pupils dilate with what could only be described as amusement. "Ambassador," Elder Vexira spoke up, her ancient voice creaking like old trees. "Your documentation seems quite animated today." The other elders' patterns rippled a wave of colors that Ilara had learned to recognize as suppressed laughter. "My documentation," Ilara said carefully, "is very thorough." Nimri chose that moment to poke her entire head out of the bag, spotted ears twitching as she surveyed the council chamber with wide-eyed wonder. The cub's purring intensified, a sound of such pure contentment that it seemed to fill every corner of the austere room. Elder Morveth's markings flashed through a rapid sequence of colors that definitely indicated internal conflict. Protocol demanded she acknowledge her daughter's breach of diplomatic proceedings. Maternal instinct clearly wanted to find the situation adorable. The other elders maintained their carefully neutral expressions, though Elder Thessar had developed a sudden fascination with the ceiling architecture. Ilara kept talking, her voice steady even as Nimri began to climb onto her shoulder. "Our two species stand at a crossroads. We can choose suspicion, or we can choose cooperation. Humanity didn't travel 300 light-years to make enemies." Nimri chirped and nuzzled against Ilara's neck, tiny claws kneading the fabric of her uniform. The cub's purring had reached a crescendo that made further conversation almost impossible. "We came," Ilara continued, raising her voice slightly, "because we believe that despite our differences, our different worlds, our different evolution, our different diplomatic protocols, we can find common ground." Elder Morveth finally stood, Her massive form towered over Alara, bioluminescent patterns swirling with a dozen conflicting emotions. For a heartbeat, Alara wondered if she'd miscalculated, if the breach of protocol would shatter the fragile peace. Then Morveth's markings settled into a soft, warm gold. "My daughter," she said slowly, "has always been an excellent judge of character. She does not purr for those who mean harm." The elder's gaze swept across the council. "Perhaps we have been too quick to interpret defense as aggression." Elder Thesser's rumbling laugh filled the chamber. "Or perhaps we are all simply weak to the sound of a contented cub." His markings had shifted to the deep blue of respect. "Very well, Ambassador Quinn. Let us review your station's specifications once more. But first," he gestured to Morveth, whose whiskers twitched with parental exasperation and unmistakable pride. "First," Morveth said, "I must retrieve my daughter before she decides your bag is her permanent residence." She gently plucked Nimri from Alara's shoulder. The cub mewled in protest, reaching tiny paws toward the human, purring even louder. As the council dissolved into what could only be described as chaos, elders cooing at the cub, Morveth apologizing profusely, and Nimri determinedly trying to escape back to Alara's bag, the human ambassador allowed herself a small smile. The Vryn were warriors, yes, ancient and proud. But they were also people. People who pretended not to notice when cubs snuck into places they shouldn't be. People who would feign ignorance rather than embarrass a fellow parent. People who understood that sometimes the loudest truths came not from speeches or treaties, but from the contented purring of a child who felt safe. 3 months later, the research station would be completed as a joint human-Vryn facility, and Nimri would officially become the facility's cultural ambassador, a position created entirely so she could continue visiting Alara's quarters whenever she pleased. But that night, as Alara returned to her quarters with a now empty bag, she found a handwritten note tucked inside. The Vryn script was careful, translated into English with obvious effort. "Thank you for not noticing, the elders." Beneath it, in tiny paw prints of bioluminescent ink, "I wasn't hiding. You were just a very good cave, Nimri." Alara laughed until tears ran down her face. And in that moment, she knew. Humanity had found not just allies among the stars, but friends.